This is Deb Accomando from ResumeBoss.com, and welcome to What Not to Do in Your First PA Job. In just a moment, I'm going to be sharing so much fantastic information to help you avoid some of the most common and consistent mistakes PAs make as they transition from academic to professional life and into their first PA job. But before I begin, I want to tell you a little bit of a story about what happened, I don't know, like maybe 7 years ago or so. It was holiday time, and my entire family, we were invited to my uncle's house for a Christmas party. And so I come from a big ethnic family, and so holiday parties are always a ton of fun. There's, a lot of great food and drinks, but even better than that, our family is always ready for some practical jokes and general tomfoolery. So we always have fun, and everybody loves family parties, and we all always have a great time. So one of my cousins, I'm going to call her Emily. That's not her name, but we'll call her Emily so she doesn't disown me if she ever sees this. So we've been super close since she was just a little kid, and I was always like her older sister, even though, I was just her cousin, and she was like my little pal, and she'd always confide in me and ask me for advice if she had, different things going on in her life when she was growing up. Now, Emily, she was always a lot of fun. All of my extended family, everybody would agree that she's a must-have at family gatherings. She's, the life of the party, warm and funny and smart, and you get it. So we get to this party, and we're all like walking in the door at the same time, my entire family, my kids, my husband, and everyone. So there's like a lot of commotion going on. And out of the corner of my eye, I see Emily, and I'm, for like a half a second, I'm thinking like something's not quite right. So I'm going to back up for a second. A few years earlier, my husband and I had talked Emily into considering becoming a PA. And at that time, she was kind of caught between a couple of different career options and wasn't sure if she wanted to take on, medical school's time and commitment and all that debt. So I spoke to her about the amazing PA profession, and I promised her that when her time came, I'd help her land a fantastic job. So, long story short, she submits a bunch of applications. She gets into a few great schools and ends up attending, a really well-respected program close to home for her. And then in what seems in no time at all, she's graduated. So she takes the pants and she passed it the first time, and boom, she gets a job at one of the most prestigious healthcare organizations in the country. And naturally, I prepped her for all the interviews, whole 9 yards, but she did it, and she did great. So after the crowd of people kind of get in and sort of dissipated, everyone making their way into the house, I finally get to lock eyes with her, and she kind of smiles back, but in her eyes, she just looks like she lost her puppy or something. And I'm like, yeah, something's definitely up. And so I found a moment when I walked over to her where no one else was around. I was like, hey, Em, how's it going? And she was like, fine, everything's good, but the vibe I was getting was, completely the opposite. Something was definitely up. And so, of course, I asked her again. I'm like, well, what's going on? I haven't seen you since you started your new job. How do you like being a PA? Do you love it? And so she paused and she looks down and she's like, I don't know how to tell you this, so I'm just gonna tell you. I got fired. And inside I'm like, what? So I quickly check myself because I feel like I don't want to make it even worse for her. And so I say, oh my God, Emily, I'm so sorry. When did this happen? And she was like, it happened about 2 weeks ago. I just couldn't bring myself to tell you after all that you did to help me. And so I finally said, well, what happened? And she looks me square in the eye, and she's like holding back tears at this point. She's like, I don't even really know. And then she says, and that's the worst part. They just said it wasn't working out and they had to let me go. And so I'm like, hey, don't worry, Emily. You're going to find a new job, no problem. And then she says something that just punches me right in the gut. She says, but Deb, how am I supposed to not do it again in my next job if I don't even know what I did wrong in the last one? And that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. If someone like Emily, someone that intelligent, knowledgeable, compassionate, honest, hardworking could get fired from her first PA job and not even know why, it could happen to anybody. And the reason's simple. Understanding how to behave in a professional environment when it's complex as healthcare, it's not intuitive for everybody. And there's a big difference between academic life and professional life. And even though everyone goes through their rotations and, they get a taste of what it's going to be like to be a provider, being an employed professional is different. And sometimes employers and other interdisciplinary team members will place expectations on you that students just don't experience. And sometimes that extra wiggle room that you might have enjoyed when you were a student may not be there once you become a professional PA. And, intuitively, most, new grad PAs know this. I mean, they know it, but they just, they might not know what to do about it. And that's why we created this video, to help you understand a little bit better about what you should expect when you launch your PA career and throughout your career. So what happened to Emily doesn't happen to you. Does that make sense? So the best way that we, thought to do this was to just ask that, we asked some of the best and most accomplished PA leaders from across the country, the folks that hire and mentor new PAs, about the most common mistakes that recent grads make when starting their careers. And what we learned could completely change how you approach your first job and every job after that. How does that sound, right? So for those of you who are wondering how it all worked out for Emily, don't worry. She's just doing just fine. She eventually found another job with a smaller employer that was just a much better fit for her, and she's thriving. Now, with several years of experience under her belt, she sees herself in many of the new grads that she precepts, and while she has a soft spot for them, she recognizes why she got fired. And we'll talk about that at the end of the video. Sound good? Okay, so let's start with a gentleman who is one of the most well-respected and impactful PAs in the profession, Dean Harrison. Dean is the Director for Advanced Practice Providers at Duke Emergency Medicine Department. He's the Director of Observational Medicine. He's the Director for Emergency Medicine Residency Program and faculty member at the Duke School of Medicine. And here's what he said when we asked him what PAs should not do in their first PA job.
Doing more than what they're comfortable doing, number one. Everyone wants to make a good impression. Everybody wants to be able to be perceived as they're doing a good job or they were a good hire. Now with that, you also have to understand your own particular limitations, whether because your training before you came into your job, your educational background. What you need to do is make sure, as we talked to before, is have some kind of knowing what the hierarchy is within the institution and what your mentor is, what individuals you can turn to for help during your initial honeymoon period of time. And the other thing is, again, I talked about this earlier, I think, perception, right? You may be perceiving that you're just doing really great. I give a lot of national talks, and sometimes I get dressed, I go out on the stage, I'm talking, and my wife sees my talk. She goes, "Are you out of your mind? What were you doing wearing that tie with that coat?" Like, I thought I was looking pretty good, but she says, no. So it's saying perception, right? And when I do quarterly evaluations for staff, what I had done in the past, the very first thing I do is say, what kind of job do you think you're doing? What's your perception? Instead of saying, hey, this, and this. And again, I want to make sure they have good insight of an actual perception of their performance versus their self-perception, right? And then I talk to them and say, well, I think you're pretty much on the mark on this, but you're way off the mark on this. So it's the same thing with new grads during their honeymoon position. They may be walking around thinking, this is great, whereas that may not be the case at all. The other aspect of it, and you have availability to make, and you hear this all the time, make a first impression only one time. I'll exemplify this, two different approaches for the same issue. You may be writing an order for something, and a new nurse may challenge you and go, hey, are you sure about this, right? Two ways to go, right? The first person can go, I wrote it, you deliver it. End of story, right? Which is terrible way of approach. Why is that terrible? First of all, you don't want to be that guy or that girl, right? Because now you're a jerk, number one. And number two, that nurse is going to tell all her friend nurses, like, that person's a jerk.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, what's happening at the nurse's station after that scenario that you just...
You're dead in the water. You're gone. You might as well resign that day, because if you upset the nurses, believe me, nurses are there and they're incredible. They're probably the most important member of the healthcare team, as far as they're the ones that are actually doing the bedside taking care of patients, right? And I will tell you, nurses have saved my butt innumerable times over the years, okay? So I bow down to nurses every day. So get back on that exemplification, just saying I told you so. I said the way you should handle that is that gives you a chance for education. Number one, it's a two-road, right? You can say to the nurse, hey, I wrote this order because of this, this, and this. That may educate the nurse that, gee, I didn't know that. That makes good sense. Then conversely, the nurse is saying, hey, that person knows what they're talking about, right? And then you have the label, hey, that person's really great to work with. They'll ask you questions, they'll answer your questions and things of that nature. And you develop that kind of relationship. But a lot of times people have that kind of response because I said so. Number one, because they don't know the correct answer. And number two, they're insecure. And instead of saying, gee, it's okay to say, I don't know, and I'm not really sure, versus, hey, thank you. I did write the wrong order. I really appreciate that. So those are the kind of things you don't want to do, number one. Number two, you also have to be insightful of what you think your shortcomings are and your strong points. And saying, because things are going to happen that you're not going to be aware of until you actually get into the job environment. But knowing that after the fact, saying, gee, I'm not doing well with this stress or that stress, or gee, I was trying to get this patient admitted to the hospital and got a lot of pushback, Okay, and you so why did you think you got pushback and things of that nature? And just things that you learn. But then identify what issues you're having, talk to somebody about what those issues are, and then move forward and learn from those experiences.
So pretty interesting, right? Let's just take a second and summarize his advice. Number one, push yourself to accept challenges that might be outside your comfort zone, but respect your limitations. Number two, check your self-perception against how others are perceiving you. Regularly ask for feedback and make those adjustments. Number three, make an excellent first impression with everyone up and down the reporting structure. Others will notice your professionalism and congeniality, which will directly impact the degree of respect and cooperation you receive. Okay, let's listen to Diane Pagan. She is the Program Director of Complex Care at WestMed Medical Group. They are an accountable care organization outside of the New York City area. WestMed's a completely different healthcare setting compared to Duke, but let's listen to what Diane has to say about what not to do as a new PA and compare what she says to Dean's advice. All right, let's listen in.
One of the things they should not do is call me up and say, can I leave at 4 o'clock instead of 4:30 every day? I think changing the time in terms of what the hours are supposed to be and shortening it tells me that they just want to run out the door.
What does that feel like to you? You've just invested all this time in bringing this person on board.
It tells me they either are not happy with what they're doing or they just wanted to get hired somewhere and their focus is not on their career but on what happens after they leave work.
What are you thinking when you get that call? Like, hey, can I leave early every day?
I have gotten that call where I've had the hours, I've been asked to please change the hours. It just doesn't sit well. It tells me that at the beginning of their career, it's not their main priority. And I want to know that, especially as a new grad, they're career focused. And there's sometimes reasons for it, and that's different. But I have had, unfortunately, this happen where I'm asked, how many breaks can I get? Why is it only 10 minutes? And why the last patient has to be scheduled at 4:30 and not 4 o'clock.
So questions around timing and changing the goalposts once they get on your doorstep and are starting.
Yes.
What's another red flag that, I'm sorry, not another red flag. What's another thing, basically a red flag, but what not to do? Like, don't do this when you start your career.
Don't piss off the people that you work with in your surrounding area. In terms of...
Well, you got a story. I could tell already. You're thinking of a story, so I want you to tell it. Tell us a story of someone who came in and pissed people off.
It was a form of a person being hired and starting and thinking that they were entitled to more than they were entitled to, in terms of who would be assisting or possibly helping them with certain things in the area. Maybe it was a nurse or somebody who was going to help them with faxing, and that person came and said that they were supposed to have this for them when they started, and it didn't happen. And they kind of went through that office and just, was directing other people to do things that really wasn't their job to do. So I think that in different organizations, sometimes staffing is short. Sometimes you can't always have everything that's supposed to be there. Maybe it'll be there eventually in terms of maybe assistance, or maybe you were promised a nurse, but now you don't have a nurse, or maybe you have to share a nurse if you're working.
What's the team thinking when that happens?
They're thinking that this is going to be a problem PA or a problem NP. And
are they talking amongst themselves about it?
Yes, they're talking amongst themselves about it because we hear about it from other departments, and they will go out of their way not to help that person after that. So you just don't want to build a reputation as being that person who just wants everything handed to them.
What do you think another, any other things that you could think of, like, absolutely do not do this when you first start your job as a PA?
Another thing that I guess to me this is the most important, is to say to somebody, I can't do this, in terms of just the role. And the role, being a PA, it's scary. It's really scary. It's scary when you first realize that you have a life that you're taking care of, and you're responsible for that life. And maybe it is a complicated patient. Don't freak out. Just don't freak out. It's anxiety provoking. And there's a lot of acknowledgement in the field about that. And I think that being able to say to your manager, I am feeling anxious. This is overwhelming. And I do want to ask for help with this, because we will help you. Human resources will help you. Organizations have the ability to help with things like this. And it's not always new grads. Sometimes it's a provider who's been around for years. But to hear somebody say, I can't, I can't do this, you're giving up too soon.
Have you ever made what you thought would be a great hire, and they arrive at your doorstep and you are surprised? What's been like the biggest surprise you could think of in making a hire?
For good or bad?
Either one. We can start with one and then we'll go to the other.
I think the worst was probably hiring somebody that was so well spoken about and referred and did incredibly wonderful on the interview process, and ended up leaving after 2 days because just felt that they couldn't do it and was not open to any type of assistance or help, or just
what did that look like? They mean they couldn't do it. What did that actually look like? It
was difficult. It was that person really being extremely unhappy to the point of being almost in tears of it's too overwhelming and just completely falling apart. And you want to help that person, and you want to be able to keep that person there, even more, because they can overcome it. They will overcome it. They just need the right resources, which would be provided. But to see that they don't even want to stop or can't go past that point, and they leave.
So what are you thinking at that point?
You think a lot of things. You think that you invested a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to credential a PA, to get them on board, to train them. They go through the organizational training. They go through the orientation process. You've taken time. You're speaking with them. You're giving them resources. And after all of that, maybe lasting 2 days, and to see that person leave, you feel like this was a waste.
Disappointment.
It's a disappointment. And it's not somebody that you want to leave. It's somebody you want to help, because you know that, with the right training, resources, support, that they would be okay. And you want them to take that time, so that's difficult.
Another interesting perspective, right? Did you notice any similarities to Dean's advice? Okay, let's summarize Diane's advice. Number 1, don't regularly ask for shift changes, breaks, or special favors. Make it clear that your job is your top priority, especially as you begin and are learning in your PA career. Number 2, don't be bossy or off-putting to your team members, including clinical and administrative support staff. Your reputation will precede you and likely impact how well or poorly you get supported. Number 3, don't get so overwhelmed by your responsibilities that you shut down. Ask for help before getting to that critical stage. All right, let's listen to what our next PA leader, Matthew Gordon, had to say. Matt is the Executive Director of Business Operations for Yale New Haven Health, where he oversees the Heart and Vascular Center, medicine services, transplant services, and radiology services. When we asked him what PAs should not do when they start their PA careers, this is what he said. Let's listen.
But going back to the honeymoon period, when you start off your orientation, what not to do is trying to prove something. I've seen new PAs and new NPs start who are trying to like orientation is a test. You have to prove yourself. You have to prove your worth, and so they come across they want to be cocky, or they be I know how to do this. I know how to do this. You don't. So just come in with a growth mindset and learn everything. There's nothing to prove at all. We're going to teach you everything. At least where I work, we're going to teach you everything that you need to know. Sure, you have to have that base education to be there. But we've already gone through that through the interview process and credentialing. We know you have the basic education. We're going to teach you the rest. So don't try to prove anything, because you could really miss out on learning opportunities if you're just trying to show us that you can do something.
What's everyone thinking when that new grad comes in and they're gung-ho and they're gonna, like you said, prove themselves?
So if they're like really gung-ho and they're brand new coming in, the locker room talk is going to be like, they're going to find out, that kind of a thing. So we know that they're probably going to have a harder time during orientation because they're so gung-ho. But the person that comes in who wants to be helpful, who wants to learn, who's asking questions, who isn't afraid of not looking smart, those are the people that are probably going to learn the fastest.
So Matthew's advice seems to dovetail with some of what we've already heard, right? I mean, we're starting to see a theme here maybe. So let's quickly summarize Matt's core message. Be careful not to come across as someone who knows it all or has something to prove to the rest of the team. You risk distancing yourself from your teammates and will miss critically essential learning opportunities. Really interesting. Okay, our next interview is with Anne-Marie Van Huff. She's the Chief APP for Hematology and Oncology at Good Samaritan Medical Center in Brockton, Massachusetts. When we asked her what PA should not do starting out, this is what she said.
So we had one provider who just had issues with the nurses and wanted them to just do what she said, even if they had questions about the decision, like it wasn't safe for a patient. And that was a really big issue. You need your nurses to feel comfortable pushing back at a provider when they are maybe making a mistake. And so that was we asked her to leave. And that was one of the big reasons we asked her to leave, because she discouraged the nurses from pushing back to her and questioning any decisions.
So when that happens, right, and you have that provider chatting with the nurses and putting them in a position where they're not feeling comfortable, and that provider walks away, what's happening at the nurses' station? What's going on?
Oh, I mean, the nurses will make it very clear to the other providers that it's not okay, which is just not okay.
What are some other things? Anything else that you could think of, things not to do for a new provider as they acclimate?
I mean, just be respectful, really understand that you're the one who's learning. The physicians are going to teach you, the other APs are going to teach you, the nurses are going to teach you, the secretaries are going to teach you. Like, don't get cocky about your role, because everyone in that practice is going to teach you things.
I mean, Anne Marie was such a pleasure to chat with. She was so raw and authentic. I mean, you could tell she loves her job and she doesn't take herself too seriously. So let's summarize her advice. Number 1, avoid pushing back on other providers or healthcare team members when they are expressing concern about your approach. Number 2, have deep respect and humility when interacting with everybody on your team, including nurses. Everyone on your team will teach you something important regardless of their level or role. And I want to add another quick note before we continue on to our next video. Hopefully you're getting a sense of the PA leaders' different personalities and personal styles in their videos. And so, did you think about what it might be like to work for someone like, Dean from Duke versus someone like Anne Marie from Good Sam or Diane from WestMed? As we continue, try to notice what leadership and communication style resonate most with you. And just make a mental note. As you interview for your dream job, knowing what you like and what works best for you is a massive piece of the whole job match puzzle. All right, so let's move on to a superstar in the medical practice world, a gentleman who is not a PA, but he's probably hired more PAs than most of the PAs in this video. Roy Gilbert. Roy has managed many large primary care and OBGYN clinics over his career and spent 10 years with the North Carolina Office of Rural Health. He has a completely different perspective, but his advice might have some interesting similarities compared to the PA leaders we've heard from so far. So let's listen to Roy.
What normally happens usually you don't get thrown into the deep end right away. Usually what happens is you come in, you meet everybody, you say hi, and they have donuts and, the whole shooting match. And then what you do is you're going to follow the supervising physician or another physician or all the physicians or all the practitioners that are in the office. You're going to follow them around for a period of time till you're comfortable. Could be a week, could be 2 weeks. Because they have to build your schedule as well. They may not have built your schedule yet, and they're building your schedule. So your first patient's not going to be for 2 weeks. So this is how we do things. This is how we build. This is how we document. Here's our EMR for you to learn.
So doing all that learning in the orientation phase.
Exactly, and basically you need to be a sponge, and you need to soak it all up. And when you're asked an opinion, you give an opinion. Normally what will happen is when you are in the room, the doctor will say to the patient, here's our new PA, Jane Doe. She's following me around for a couple of weeks. Is it okay if she's here? And the patient always says, yeah, it's fine, no problem. So the doctor does the thing in the exam. Some doctors in the room with the patient will say, what do you think? Give them an answer. Tell them what you think. Okay. Most wait until you go out in the hall till after the visit, and they'll ask you questions, and you can ask questions of that visit. And the questions you need to ask are where you feel you are the most unsure. There's basically what we're talking about is we're talking about an examination, which is a hands-on examination of the patient. We're talking about an assessment of all the data that you have, and then we're talking about a plan. Okay, what is going to be the plan for this patient going forward? Now, a lot of times what the doctors will do as they bring you on is they will have you more and more involved. Mm-hmm. Okay, here's all the data, what do you see? Well, I think the patient may have type 2 diabetes. We got to do some blood tests and da-da-da-da. Good, I agree with that. That's what we're going to do, and here's the plan for the patient. The doctor tells the patient. On and on and on until it's time for you to start seeing your own patients. Okay? So the best thing you could be is confident, not cocky in your ability.
What does that look like? What does cocky look like?
Cocky looks like, I can do this. Just give me patience. Just leave me alone. That's what cocky looks like. Cocky looks like, I don't need you.
What's going on at the nurse's station when that cocky provider comes along?
Anything they can do to sabotage.
What might that look like?
That would look like not rooming patients when you should be, taking longer than necessary to triage, not doing all the paperwork, not filling in the EMR as it should be filled in. You name it.
So
not having all the equipment ready, that needs to be cleaned and sanitized.
So that could be the fallout from the ancillary staff if a provider's, quote unquote cocky.
They're running the show. It's the having the nurses work with you as opposed to for you is a key to getting started on the right foot.
I love that Roy included an overview of what to expect when starting your career in a medical practice, which could be, very different, from an experience starting in a large teaching hospital. And hopefully you got a sense of a, one-on-one mentorship and more of an informal feel. That's not the case across the board, but something that isn't uncommon in a medical practice environment. But with that difference, we did notice something similar in Roy's advice. For Roy, it was all about striking the right balance in your communication style. Here it is. Be confident, but not cocky. Your communication approach makes a big difference, especially with the nursing and ancillary staff, who might choose to undermine you if they feel, diminished by your words or actions. That's pretty good advice, and not the first person we've heard offer, similar insight. Okay, so let's move on to Jason Astron, the Director of APP Services with the U.S. Oncology Network, another incredibly experienced APP leader responsible for overseeing hundreds of PAs across his career. And this is what Jason had to say about what not to do when starting out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they shouldn't be lazy. And so
what does that look like?
Well, I mean, if a PA is just going to kind of go through the motions, see patients with the physicians, not really take notes, because there's questions. The physician's like, okay, this patient has melanoma, and these are the things we worry about in melanoma. And if that PA doesn't go home and read on melanoma, then they'll miss it. They've missed that learning opportunity, and they'll have to wait for 3 or 4 more melanomas before they figure out, oh, that's what he was talking about. So what we try to tell our new hires is to do just that. So we say, look, I know you graduated from school. Congratulations, you passed your boards.
But you're still in school.
And you're still in school. And you're going to be taking notes. And you're going to be just attached to the hip. I try to tell the docs to make it kind of on their logic is treat this PA like your fellow. So have them go in the room by themselves. Have them introduce themselves to the patient. Have them do the history and physical. Have them come out and present to you just like they did in school, just like your fellows did when you were in academics. And then you both go in and re-examine, re-eval, whatever the case may be. And you hope that PA, what I tell the PA then is make sure you have your notebook or your iPad or whatever you're doing and keep notes of, okay, go home and read that article, find that article on breast cancer, find that whatever the case may be. So it's challenging if for the PA that's not motivated to really continue the learning process, if they just think I'm going to be complacent and just be happy because I have a job, then those are the PAs that the docs will then usually call me and say, this person is not catching on. They're not getting it.
Mm-hmm. What are some other things that maybe new hires should not be doing? And maybe it's in relation to, their interactions with their multidisciplinary team.
I mean, I think that in some of our practices, and we lay out a framework for practices to do this, but if they don't have to do it, and so some don't do it, is if the PA is, sitting with the physician, seeing patients with the physician, but to your point, not really developing relationships with other people in that office or in that practice, then that's going to be a huge issue because, as we know, the physicians are not completely leading that practice, right? So a physician sees a patient or PA sees a patient and the patient needs a scan. Well, that can go now to maybe a scheduler, maybe a prior authorization person. Maybe there's a particular radiology center that they use that the PA doesn't know. There's a process that the PA needs to learn. And the PA can assume, this actually, I was just on the call before our call with the practice going through this exact same thing. The PA, new hire, assumed that they were going to give them everything. I'm going to give you all the knowledge of how to run in this, how to work in this practice. Well, of course that doesn't happen. But the PA never went out on their own to meet the pharmacists, to meet the social workers, to meet the patient navigators, to get a relationship going, right? How can I help you? And particularly if you're the first PA, those other people, other specialists, paraprofessionals, they don't know what you're doing there either. And so I think they need to be able to be accessible to the staff and develop those relationships, introduce themselves. And we have a model where we have practices, if they follow it, we say, okay, in week 1, have them sit with your your patient financial counselor, your front desk, your lab, just so they see those processes.
So again, we're hearing a lot of the same themes here, right, with Jason's advice. Number 1, don't be lazy. Every case is an opportunity to advance your knowledge and skills. So take notes and read up on what you've observed after your shift. Number 2, develop strong relationships with the entire disciplinary team, including introducing yourself to anyone new, asking about their role in care delivery, and providing insight on yours. Okay, let's hear from Cara Lombardo, Chief Surgical PA at Danbury Hospital, which is a part of the Nuvance Health System. I've actually known Cara for a long time, and she truly is a special APP leader. Here's Cara's take on what not to do when starting your PA career.
I think starting out, have that expectation of, you want to be available, whatever the schedule may be. If you're someone that takes a job where you're going to be working 3 12-hour shifts, but in the beginning, they're asking you to come in and work 5 days a week to train, you need to be available for that. So I think you have to have the mindset of, whatever's going to work for your new team, your new boss to train you, you have to be open to that. Because if you're not showing that flexibility from the beginning, that's going to be problematic during your training and then down the road.
Absolutely. So that's a great thing that you should be doing, showing flexibility. Let's talk about what they should not be doing. What shouldn't they be doing when they walk into that job?
So
story time.
Yeah. And again, it's, in the very beginning and this is true of and I think of all the jobs all 3 jobs I've had in my life as a PA, but with every new position, there's always that time where, there's so much that you're trying to comprehend in the beginning, and it's very overwhelming. And that doesn't change, whether it's your first job or your last job 30 years later. I think that people get caught up when they aren't open to just taking it in and learning. Sometimes people are resistant to what we're trying to teach them. Sometimes people will think there's a better way.
What are you thinking at that point
Well, it's, for me, I'm thinking, you have to be open to where we're going. We have a process. It has worked for us. And if people aren't flexible to that, then that starts to make me nervous that things aren't going to work out. I had a very experienced APP who joined our team, very experienced in their total healthcare experience, but fairly new APP, had only been in practice 3 years, and this was their first job in a surgical setting. But they had that mindset that they knew a lot already, and it showed, because they were very resistant to other people trying to, just basic things of, our workflow, like what doctors like us to round on their patients, and there were just and it just every day was a struggle, because this person you always felt tension and resistance because they just were not open to learning the process. And in the end, that person realized that this job wasn't for them, and they wound up leaving, 3 months after they had started, which is a lot of work for us to put in. I mean, I'm glad that they figured that out before they had been there a long time, but you just have to, you can't be resistant to what works.
What's the rest of the team, thinking at that point when someone's
it's
acting
exhausting.
that way?
It's exhausting. And it puts a wedge between the rest of the team and that person, because, they all work well together. And we have a workflow that has been proven to work. And so when you have someone like that, it brings negativity to everyone else. And then unfortunately, then everyone kind of starts backing themselves away from that person. So yes, they will answer questions, but they're not as open and as giving to helping with training because that person's got the perception of, well, I know what to do, or I don't need you to show me anything.
Why do you think they're acting that way?
In the particular example I just gave, I think it was just someone who had been a practitioner for a long time and didn't enjoy learning from people that were younger. As I consider myself an old PA now, although I'm not that old, but I love the enthusiasm of my new grads. I have 5 PAs that have under 3 years of experience, and I learn from them all the time, and I embrace it, and I think it's great. But that doesn't work for everyone. And I think that was the problem and that they just couldn't get over that gap of age and experience, but you have to be open to learning from anyone.
From everyone. So kind of wrapping up on, what not to do when you first become a PA. What do you think what could you say was your biggest, surprise in terms of a red flag where you're like, wow, I never could have seen that coming?
I had 2 people. The one that we had, there was someone we had talked about earlier that, had just come out of school, and when you meet someone and you interview with them, everyone can be nice and everyone can give the right answers. And then they come and they're just not the person that you thought they were. And it's always it's disappointing. Cause you think you have a good sense of character with people when you talk to them. And there's another APP that I worked with, and it was the same thing. Like, actually interviewed and just very personable and gave all the right answers, and then came on board and was a completely different person. Not team oriented.
Well, what would that look like? Give me an example of not team oriented.
So
what do they do?
So my team right now, we in the mornings, we all get together in the morning to review all the patients that we have on the floor. And we do that together, and we kind of divide and conquer what patients we need to round on. There, some people will be scheduled to go first assist in the OR, but we always sit down together as a team to do that so that we're all on the same page of what's going on for the day. But when you have one person who doesn't come into the room where we're all together doing that, makes their own assignment, goes and sees their own patients, doesn't communicate back with us of their own patients. It's just someone who's not...
Imagine it causes a divide.
Totally. 100%. Right. And same thing, like with anything else, it's, over time it becomes taxing on everybody else because it's stressful, because you feel like, well, why are you off here in this room by yourself when we're all working together? And sometimes it's a personality thing. Sometimes it's just the way that they work. But you also have to, it's important to be working knowing the way that you work to pick a job that fits that style.
Exactly.
And if you're a loner and like to do things on your own, then working on a team is not
The best place for you.
exactly.
So a lot of great advice from Kara. Some stuff we've heard and, some that we haven't, right? Here we go. Number 1, make yourself freely available to work and do any additional training to help you develop your skills so you could quickly become a contributing team member. Number 2, don't resist the established workflow. Much time, effort, and energy went into creating the existing care delivery process. And opposing it is really like a big red flag that could end up marginalizing you or worse. Number 3, practice humility and be open to learning from everyone on your team. Number 4, don't work independently to the exclusion of your team members. Embrace the team and your role and function within that team. Great stuff. All right, let's hear from Ryan Desgrange. Ryan is the APP Director for the Orthopedic Service Line at Henry Ford Health. Another highly experienced APP leader with a ton of experience overseeing large PA teams in busy acute care settings. This is what Ryan said when we asked him what not to do in your first PA job.
Okay. Well, I think one of the things that's very most common, and I think a lot of us in the medical profession have a type A personality, is not admitting mistakes or not asking questions. Certainly for a new grad, it's a carry-on, right? Like we have 1 year of clinical rotations that we're learning and trying to understand, but here you're practicing as a fully fledged licensed PA. Medicine is ongoing as far as the knowledge base and everything like that. So I think it's up to that mentor, that director, or whoever that supervisor is to give it an open feeling as far as you can ask these questions. You can make mistakes. You can call me. You can text me. And so really setting that tone. So for me, a PA that does not feel comfortable with that, or if they're doing things that I'm unaware of, that's where you start to have issues and things like that. And that's where you start to get concerned about their practice. And is this something future that could be a litigation issue as well? So trying to nip some of those behaviors in the bud is key, and really setting that tone like, hey, this is a team-based approach. Let's have open communication, open dialogue. And really for the new grad, in my impression and opinion and, experience, is these individuals, these PAs, when you're able to knock down that wall between a supervisor and a new grad PA, they appreciate that. They're much more open. They're much more willing. They're much more thankful for that experience.
So we're talking about what not to do, and you're giving some great kind of overall thoughts about areas to avoid. But can you think of some stories of new hires that have come on board and specific examples of things that, man, they shouldn't have really done that, not getting off to a great start?
Yeah. So one of the things I also do is I completely appreciate the ambition. As I said previously on this podcast, I think those individuals looking to see how can they augment or enhance the organization is vital. But I think there's also a cautionary tale as far as getting involved in too much. Certainly I had one PA that I was aware of that got involved in their state organization. They ended up getting involved in their hospital committee, and then they had their job. And so for them, they were constantly letting me know how busy they were, but come to find out it's with things outside of what their work duties were. And so what happened eventually was they burn out, they quit, they couldn't handle it. They started making patient mistakes. They started getting to the point where they had less ability to kind of reflect on some of their experiences with the patients, to where all of a sudden they would get upset. They would get argumentative with the patients because they were burnout. They had too many things. They put too much on their plate right away. So I think one of those cautionary tales is really kind of taking one step at a time. Once you fine tune that job and understand those job duties and understanding that stress level and finding out how you can delegate if you're able to, or share some of those duties, then you can take that next step and take on maybe a committee involvement, a council involvement as well.
So not doing too much too fast.
Yeah. And for me, it's all about work-life balance. That's the one thing that I say is work hard when you're at work and work hard on your family or your personal life when you're at home, and keep those things separate. And that's all that I ask out of those individuals. And so certainly I'm a proponent on avoiding burnout. And so for those people that I can see have the ambition, and, you know, I can look at their resume and see their involvement in multiple things and volunteer events, I also say, hey guys, let's just focus on this within the first 90 days, because most of the time that's the time to where I could let them go. And let's focus on making sure you're doing everything right.
100%. So thinking about, you know, things that they shouldn't do, what comes to mind for me is really maybe their interactions with the interdisciplinary team, right? Because it's the PA, the surgeon, but there's lots of other disciplines that are involved that make up that care team. So any words of caution, things that they shouldn't be doing as it relates to becoming a new member of the team?
You know, I think probably the big thing is, you know, really overselling themselves at that point. You know, I think it's a case where people want to know about them, but I think it's given your background and knowing that you've already got your foot in the door, you're already part of the team, and not taking it to the next step. Especially it's the case to where, you know, that can come off as threatening, somebody who's overambitious. You know, certainly we know that there's different personalities, there's different work ethics. And so I think really kind of stepping back and getting an impression of what your work team is, and kind of, you know, who can I go and talk to this way? How can I interact with people this way? I think is vital, is really knowing yourself and as well as knowing your team.
What does overly ambitious look like?
Right. So for me, I can say from my own personal experience. So when I left the emergency room and I decided to go into orthopedics, I was blessed. I loved it. I mean, for me, orthopedics, you know, as being originally a fine arts major, it's an art form, right? You come in with a deformed forearm and you're like, oh my gosh, how can I make this look perfect? And you reduce it. You put it in a splint, you put it in a cast, and it looks beautiful when you see it on those post-reduction x-rays. Well, at that time in my institution, I was one of 8 PAs. So in the case where we had a pediatric patient with a both bone forearm fracture, 6 of us would go down there to do the reduction, do the splinting, do the casting. And for me, I was like, hey, I'm here to learn. I want to do this all myself. And I literally said, I want to move to midnights. I want to do 24 and 36 hour shifts. And I want to be able to do it all myself. Well, that came off as, you know, rather threatening and everything like that. Like Ryan doesn't want to be a team player. But for me, it was the way that I had come off, you know, saying, I don't need anybody. I can figure this stuff out. When in actuality, I am a team player. I just wanted to be able to learn. It was so how I articulated those things, how I interacted with people, I think was vital. And then I think ultimately it's the case of not being braggadocious. I mean, certainly all of us have different ambitions. Maybe we have the time to go into research things. Maybe we have time to lecture and do research projects. But I think trying to avoid throwing it in other individuals' faces and everything like that, I think that's probably vital as well, as far as not being or coming off-putting to people.
So again, great advice. Ryan makes 5 great points. All right, let's summarize. 1, admit your mistakes. Easy to say, but hard to do in real life. Number 2, ask questions, lots of them. 3, keep your supervising physician and PA supervisors in the loop on what you're doing and any challenges that you might face. Healthcare delivery is a team sport and never a one-person operation. 4, being ambitious is great, but don't spread yourself too thin by taking on too many responsibilities outside of your formal work duties, and leave room for a work-life balance, because things are going to get stressful, and that's when mistakes happen. 5, exercise humility. If you brag or oversell yourself, you might come across as being professionally threatening. All great advice. Let's listen to another PA I know very well, a rock star in the cardiothoracic surgery world, although he'd never say that. He's too modest and understated. Tim Hansen. Tim is the chief cardiothoracic PA at Stanford Hospital, and he's been there for well over a decade. Let's hear Tim's take on what not to do in your first PA job.
I mean, it's sounds kind of obvious, but don't be lazy. You know, you want to be as ready and willing to do everything you can to learn, your new profession. This is your opportunity to sort of really get into the patient side of things. You have that huge base of medical knowledge now. You want to get out there and you want to do, and you need help doing that. So you want to take the opportunities. You want to, be eager to do new things. If I were a new student, I wouldn't, hide behind someone else and let someone, get that opportunity. I would be the one to say, hey, can you teach me how to do that?
What does lazy look like?
Well, I don't know. It's sort of subtle.
You know. What does lazy look like? They want to know.
Not wanting to stay late, not wanting to show up and maybe someone wants to do the bare minimum to get paid. That's not what we're looking for as a team member.
Mm-hmm.
So,
what else shouldn't they be doing when they first arrive?
I think they shouldn't be. It's hard to have confidence or self-confidence in a brand new situation, but I would say don't be scared to put yourself out there. Try not to hide behind your insecurities. I would say just be confident that you need to learn how to do something and do the best you can, because most, as a leader, I'm not going to let somebody fail. For instance, it's difficult to tackle some situations together, but if you have the mindset that this is something that I can do, this is what I'm excited about doing, you're gonna learn.
What are you thinking when someone comes in and they're not expressing that, showing that they're confident?
Well, I'm wondering if it's the right field. If you're in a very specific field, like one of the surgical subspecialties, and you're either not enjoying yourself or you don't have that sort of drive to learn and succeed, maybe you're in the wrong field, and that happens to people.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is a journey. You're not always. It's sort of the beauty of the PA profession overall is you can go into different fields. You don't have to. You're not locked in. So if there was somebody that was not showing those qualities or not telling me that they're excited,
right.
Maybe you should try something else.
So we're talking about someone who's coming in that's being underconfident, but what about the person who shows up and they're overconfident?
Yeah, like I said, you do have to know your limitations. And when you're a new graduate, you have a lot of limitations, and you have a lot to learn. So it's a matter of being eager and willing without being overconfident, like I'm going to go throw that chest tube in, and that's not how it works.
What'll that look like if someone's being overconfident? What are they doing?
I think getting in too deep. I mean, God forbid you have a bad patient outcome because of it. Mm-hmm. And the experienced PAs have to recognize that, right. and I would have to intervene before something happens, right? So if someone, they think they know how to treat this particular patient, but maybe their thinking isn't quite where it needs to be, or maybe they're looking at it the wrong way, that's a learning opportunity. So it's something that can be used to create a positive. But if that's a routine and, they think that they know the better way, that's, maybe it's not a good fit.
What's the team thinking when that PA shows up and they're overconfident?
They're probably thinking, well, they're going to learn. But, if the other part of it is the one thing you do want to do, we're talking about, do's and don'ts, but you want to be helpful to your teammates. Everybody knows you're not fully functional. You're not going to be able to do everything on your own yet, but you can be helpful while you're learning. And that can be, writing that consult note that, one of your team members is overwhelmed with other responsibilities, can't get to. Hey, let me take care of that for you. Something as simple as that can go a long way to telling another person or the rest of the team, you know what, this person's willing to chip in and do what's needed.
Mm-hmm. What other things come up for you when you think about, and maybe a specific story would be a great option, but someone that's coming in and they're doing everything wrong?
Well, you sort of have to have an intervention, right? I mean, if
I don't know, what does that look like? What's an intervention look like?
Well, it would be kind of a formal sit down to say, here's where you started, here's where you are, these are the things you are doing right, these are the things we need to work on. And I think that's pretty standard for any new hire, whether you're experienced or you're not experienced. You have that evaluation period. And after 3 months or 6 months, you need to, I think, intervene early to correct certain things that might be correctable. And as long as you, as the new hire, are willing to be receptive to that sort of constructive criticism, or let's think about things this way instead of your own way, I think you can certainly still succeed.
So again, we're hearing some of the same themes with Tim's advice as well, right? Number 1, don't be lazy. Take every opportunity to develop your skills and clinical knowledge. Number 2, be confident, but accept your limitations without letting them define, what you're willing to try and experience. Number 3, be open to constructive criticism. That one habit might be what saves your job when you make an error. I love it. All right, so let's get to one of my other favorite people, Liz Mazzelli. Liz is also a PA that I've known personally for years and years. She's absolutely one of my favorite people, and one of the best PA leaders and preceptors in the business. She presently serves as the manager of operations at the Connecticut Orthopedic Institute at St. Vincent's Medical Center. Here's Liz's take on what not to do.
Not be a team player. Mm-hmm. Act like we owe them something. Entitlement is one of the biggest red flags in your first 90 days.
What does that look like? Someone coming in and being entitled?
Someone coming in acting like they shouldn't be seeing the extra patients. Why am I staying late if I'm not getting paid for it? I operated with that surgeon yesterday. Why do I have to do it today? Worst things you can say.
Wow.
Right? I mean, because you want someone who's a go-getter, who understands I'm new, but I'm going to do everything I can to learn everything I can. Even if it means I have to stay late for 30 minutes and not get paid for it, I'm willing to make the sacrifice, because that is someone in my mind where when I am doing the annual review, I'm going to be like, look at all those times you really helped us. Guys, leaders keep track of that. We have a journal, whether we admit it or not, or maybe it's a mental journal. I tend to write stuff down. So that way, when the annual review comes up, I'll say, hey, look at all these positive things you did for us. Thank you so much. And I do think coming into this thinking, I don't have to do this. I've earned you haven't earned your keep at all. We never earn our keep. You're always earning it. But yeah, I mean.
So what are some of the other things that might come up that you've had experience with that, like, wow, probably shouldn't have done that right out the gate?
Yeah. Being overconfident. I've seen a couple people who are, the root of it's insecurity. If you look back on it, from some of the people that I've pulled aside to talk to, and they try to overcompensate. Right. So in your honeymoon phase, you don't want to try to act like you are better than you are. You don't want to overcompensate to the point where it's like you're trying to keep up with the people in your group that have been doing this for 15, 20, 30 years.
Can you give all those folks out there a good example? Because I'm sure you have someone that you're thinking of in your brain that maybe overcompensated.
Yes. We had someone, I'll never forget, the person had just had abdominal surgery. And I said, do you want me to help you pack the wound? The
Oh,
actual
okay.
patient.
Okay.
The patient. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The patient had.
I was like,
abdominal-
who actually had
That's a way to get
that
a
was
job.
a
Get
misplaced,
operated on.
That was a misplaced modifier. Okay.
But the patient had just had abdominal surgery.
Okay.
And they went to pack a wound. It's very
Okay.
simple. You pull like a shoelace out, you put a new shoelace in. Okay.
Okay.
So I said to them, do you need help? Nope, I got it. I said, okay. And they came back and the bottle was empty. I said, where did all that packing go? And they said, well, I put it in the belly. And I said, how much did you pull out? And they were like, this much. And I said, so you pulled out this much and you put in this much? They had torn through the fascia and was packing the abdominal cavity, had broken a vessel, and the patient ended up bleeding. And had we not gone back to check. Wow. But to them, it's simple procedure. I've done it before in clinic, not a big deal.
Right.
You know, always have someone at least go with you to walk you through the first couple times, even if you've done it in your electives or you've done it in your rotations. It's a different world than when you're actually doing it in real life. When you put that long white coat on, there's a lot of pressure that goes with that. And everybody acts different. And I think you have to just be cognizant of that during your honeymoon phase, like you're saying. Some people overcompensate. Some people are shy and they don't want to do anything. And some people just are lazy and they think they've earned their way. I've done my school. I know my stuff. I passed my boards. Obviously, I'm good enough to be here. We're never good enough. And the one thing that my supervising physician always says to me is everyone's replaceable. And you have to go in with that mentality. Everyone is always replaceable.
So Liz offers a lot of the same fundamental advice, right? Here we go. Number 1, don't be a maverick. Be a team player. Number 2, be careful not to come across as, entitled or above the job or the team. Be willing to do whatever it takes to learn and contribute, even if it requires you to do more than what's written in the job description. Number 3, don't be overconfident in your approach. Ask for help and oversight. So now we've watched 10 high-level APP leaders from various healthcare organizations from all over the country. What sort of jumps to mind for you? Could it be that new providers tend to make very similar mistakes regardless of location or clinical setting? And if that's true, what does that mean for you? All right, let's hear from none other than Michael Huckabee. Michael is the Associate and Founding Director at the Mayo Clinic's Physician Assistant Program, and we were fortunate enough to get him to chat with us on this topic. And what he has to say is definitely worth your attention. Let's listen.
I would say they shouldn't hold back if offered. No one's going to recommend you do something if they really don't think you can. And for them to say, hey, would you like to take this task on, to see this challenging patient, or to be involved in this procedure, or to come in at 5 a.m, or to take call this weekend. Boy, think twice before you say, yeah, I'm not sure that's not going to fit me, or I'd like to get more experience with you before I do that, because they believe in you and they wouldn't offer it if they didn't think you were up for that. So I'd be really, in those first few days, really try to be agreeable and willing to step out. And even if that means interrupting your schedule a little bit, or going a little bit extra besides what you were planning to be willing to do that at the front gate is really helpful, rather than you initially already saying, yeah, no, I have to leave at this certain time, or I'm not comfortable in that environment. You don't want to hide behind those things. But just remember, when you then do have to maybe get into an environment that isn't quite your comfort zone, then get some help. And there's people around you that can help. So be very careful. We can talk about that more fully, but there's always going to be somebody around who you could pull aside to say, hey, would you just check me on this, or can you talk me through how this place likes to see this done? And then I'm happy to do it. Just a little word, or have someone alongside of you. But for you to admit to say, no, I'm not comfortable with that, boy, that's doesn't sit well, doesn't feel good for you, doesn't feel good unless you're really invited for that. The employer may say, are you comfortable with this? Well, be honest. But if at all, try to say, yeah, I'm willing to try. I'm willing to work on that. I'm
going to do that, and then make sure you have the support around you to do it well.
What other things shouldn't you not be doing when you first arrive?
Yeah. Don't be late. Be early. Be willing to show that you're there for the extra mile. Later on, you may want to put some boundaries around that. But initially, you want to be the go-getter, and you want to be the person that everybody recognizes, hey, I can ask them. And allow that to be your reputation up front to begin with.
What other things have you seen in your career? You know, you select that PA, you're all excited for them to start, and then now they're on board and they're doing something and you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that this person has done this.
It's really out of my own personal story, where it was actually my second job, but new on the job, I had sewed up a guy's wrist from a laceration that he suffered putting his hand through a mirror. And when he returned for the suture removal, he went to his physician for that. And there was a piece of glass that I had missed. And I thought I'd looked at it well, and I thought everything was taken care of. But the physician found a piece of glass in there and had to come to me and say, just thought you should know that this happened. And my heart just sinks. And there's so many things my mind wants to circle around to. Is there any way that's a mistake? Is there any way that I can explain why that could have happened? But then I realized, Huckabee, you just missed it. And you're at fault here. But it is an error that can happen. It's not, and the physician helped me with that, to say this isn't the end of the world. But I need to be sure you're aware of this and want to be sure you're being careful with that. That was really a hard lesson for me. And I was harder on myself than probably needed to be. The issue then is I didn't want to be on call again by myself. I didn't want to take the responsibility with that. And I had to kind of get over myself to say, but I know how to do this, and I know how to look at that. And I don't know what size the fragment was. Maybe it was so small. I don't know. We didn't go into the details with it. But to be resilient, I think, is really important. That if you face an obstacle, you got to own that, and you got to. So seeking that feedback, it would have been better for me to have to find that out by my asking rather than someone coming to me. That would have been an unusual situation. But maybe it would be a great idea to stop maybe a few days in or a week into the job and say, hey, can I have 5 minutes at the end of your day? And I'd like you just to tell me how you think I'm doing. And what's anything going on that you'd like me to explore and be sure I'm doing well. I will bet they'll always have something to offer you. It's a great question to ask. It shows your ability to want to contribute to the team, but it also shows your humility of I'm understanding it may not be a perfect world yet. And so can you help me with that? And it allows you to initiate that conversation so somebody didn't have to initiate it with you.
So whether you work as somewhere as prestigious as the Mayo Clinic or Duke or Yale, or a humble medical practice or community hospital, it seems like the advice Michael offers works across the board. Number 1, don't hide from new challenges and opportunities. Be eager to accept and consider the request as a vote of confidence. Number 2, don't be late. Be early. Go the extra mile, especially at the start of your career. Number 3, handle your mistakes with humility and self-forgiveness. But don't let them undermine your confidence. Own your errors and be resilient. Pretty amazing, right? I mean, so simple and in many ways, so obvious. And yet they all recounted the mistakes they see most commonly. And much of what they offered, it overlapped. So why do these mistakes happen to so many really intelligent, kind, and hardworking new PAs? PAs like, my cousin Emily. And as it turns out, the answer is simple. No one told them what to do. That reminds me of a famous quote from the great Maya Angelou. Do the best you can do until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. Now you know better, right? So there's actually another great quote my dad always told me when he was warning me not to do something that he thought I might later regret, and I feel like it's just perfect for now. A smart person learns from their mistakes, but a wise person learns from the mistakes of others. You've just learned what to not do in your first PA job from the mistakes of literally thousands of new providers across the last 40 years of clinical practice. Not too shabby. So, I guess that makes you the wisest PA of all. Now do better. Thanks so much for listening. This is Deb Accomando from Resume Boss saying so long, and I'll see you all next time.